The wooden sign reading Mineral Point, Wisconsin Territory, swayed in the autumn wind of 1848 as Sarah Dalton stood on the dusty Main Street, watching the stagecoach being loaded with her 3 leather trunks and everything she owned that mattered enough to take with her. The lead and zinc mines that had brought prosperity to this rough settlement had also brought her here 2 years ago with her late husband. But now that he was gone, buried beneath the cold earth on the hillside cemetery, there was nothing left to keep her in this God-forsaken place except debts and memories she desperately wanted to escape. She adjusted her black mourning dress, still the darkest thing she owned even though Thomas had been dead for 8 months now. The fabric felt heavy in more ways than one, weighing down her shoulders with the expectations of proper widowhood that this frontier town still clung to despite its rough edges. At 24 years old, Sarah felt ancient, worn down by grief, and the harsh realities of trying to survive as a woman alone in a mining town where men outnumbered women 10 to 1, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about what she should do with her life. The stage driver, a grizzled man named Pete who smelled of tobacco and leather, tipped his hat to her. "We will be ready to depart in about 30 minutes, Mrs. Dalton. Best say your goodbyes now if you have any to make." Sarah nodded, though she knew there were precious few goodbyes to say. She had sold the small house Thomas had built for them to pay off his medical debts and the money owed to the mining company. The remaining funds would barely get her to St. Louis, where her sister lived, but it would be enough for a fresh start, a chance to become someone other than the pitied widow of a man who had died coughing up blood from the lead dust in his lungs. She turned to take one last look at the mercantile where she had worked for the past 6 months, trying to make ends meet. Mrs. Henderson had been kind enough to give her the job, but the pay was meager and the work exhausting. Through the window, she could see the older woman helping a customer, and Sarah felt a pang of guilt for leaving without more notice, but she had written a letter explaining everything and left it on the counter that morning before dawn. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A rider was coming down the main street at a leisurely pace, sitting tall in the saddle on a beautiful chestnut mare. Sarah recognized him immediately, though they had never spoken more than a few words in passing. Lucas Xavier was a cowboy who worked for one of the larger ranches outside of town, bringing cattle to market and supplies back to the ranch. She had seen him around Mineral Point often enough, always polite, always with his hat tipped low over his eyes and a quiet manner that set him apart from the rowdy miners who spent their earnings on whiskey and card games. He was probably in his late 20s, with sun-darkened skin and the kind of lean, muscular build that came from years of hard work. There was something inherently decent about him, Sarah had always thought, in the way he spoke gently to his horse and helped elderly Mrs. Chen carry her packages without being asked. Not that any of that mattered now. She would be gone within the hour, and Lucas Xavier would just be another face she half remembered from her time in this place. But instead of riding past, Lucas brought his mare to a stop right in front of her. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time on horseback than on foot, and she noticed his eyes were a striking light brown, almost amber in the afternoon sun. He held his hat in his hands, and she could see genuine concern in his expression. "Mrs. Dalton," he said, his voice a low, warm rumble. "I heard you were leaving today. I wanted to catch you before you did." Sarah felt her defenses rise immediately. If he was here to lecture her about propriety or to make some inappropriate proposition like several other men had done since Thomas died, she would set him straight quickly. "Yes, I am leaving. The stage departs shortly." "I know this is not my place," Lucas continued, looking down at his hat as if gathering courage. And I know we do not know each other well. But I also know that Thomas Dalton was a good man, and before he died, he spoke to me once when I visited him at your house. You might not remember, I brought some beef from the ranch as a gift when I heard he was sick. Sarah did remember vaguely. Thomas had been so ill by then, barely conscious most days. She had been surprised when a cowboy had shown up at their door with fresh meat wrapped in brown paper, refusing payment and tipping his hat before leaving. "I remember," she said softly. Lucas met her eyes then, and she was struck by the intensity of his gaze. "He asked me to look out for you if anything happened to him. Said he worried about leaving you alone here. I gave him my word I would, but I have been respecting your mourning period and your privacy. But now, I hear you are leaving, and I feel like I am breaking a promise to a dying man." The words hit Sarah harder than she expected. She blinked back sudden tears, angry at herself for being so emotional. "Mr. Xavier, that is very kind, but Thomas had no right to burden you with that. I can take care of myself. I am going to St. Louis to live with my sister." "Do you want to go to St. Louis?" The question was direct but not unkind. "It does not matter what I want, it is what makes sense." Lucas was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. What if there was a reason to stay? What if staying made sense too? Sarah laughed, a bitter sound. "There is no reason to stay. I have sold everything, paid off all the debts. There is nothing left for me here." "What if there could be?" She stared at him, not understanding. The stage driver called out that it was time to load passengers, and Sarah felt a flutter of panic. She needed to end this conversation and get on that stage before she lost her nerve. Lucas seemed to sense her urgency. He spoke quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush that was unlike his usual measured way of speaking. "I have a small ranch, about 5 miles outside of town. It is nothing fancy, but it is mine, paid for with 10 years of hard work. I have been saving up, building it slowly. I have 40 head of cattle, good grazing land, a solid house with 3 bedrooms and a real stone fireplace. I was planning to find a wife eventually, someone to build a life with, but the timing never seemed right and I never met anyone who felt like the right person." Sarah's heart was pounding. She could not believe what she was hearing. "Mr. Xavier, what are you saying?" He took a deep breath. "I am saying I can offer you a home, a partnership. Not charity, I want to be clear about that. I need help running the ranch. It is too much for one person. You would have your own room, your own space. No expectations beyond helping with the work. But you would be safe, and you would have a roof over your head, and you would not have to leave if you did not want to." "We barely know each other," Sarah protested, even as something in her chest loosened at his words. "That is true. But I know you are honest and hardworking. Mrs. Henderson says you were the best employee she ever had. And I know that Thomas trusted you with his whole heart, which speaks to your character. As for me, you can ask anyone in town. I pay my debts, I keep my word, and I have never raised a hand to man or beast in anger." The stage driver was getting impatient. "Mrs. Dalton, we need to leave now or we will miss the connection in Dodgeville." Sarah looked at the stage coach, then back at Lucas. His expression was open, hopeful but not demanding. He was offering her a choice, a real choice, not trying to manipulate or coerce her. It was so unexpected, so completely not what she had planned for, that she felt frozen, unable to think clearly. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Say you will at least think about it. Tell the driver to unload your trunks. Come out to the ranch with me right now, see the place. If you do not like it, if it does not feel right, I will personally drive you to Dodgeville tomorrow in my wagon and pay for your stage fare. But at least see what you would be turning down before you make your final decision." It was crazy. It was impulsive. It went against every carefully laid plan she had made. But something in Sarah's heart was saying yes. whispering that maybe this was the second chance she had not dared to hope for. "Mrs. Dalton." The driver's voice was sharp now. She made her decision. Turning to the driver, she said firmly, "Please unload my trunks. I will not be traveling today after all." The driver's face turned red. "You are joking. We are already behind schedule." "I apologize for the inconvenience, but I have changed my mind. I will pay the cancellation fee." Lucas was already moving, helping the driver pull her trunks down from the top of the coach. The driver grumbled and complained, but he accepted the coins. Sarah counted out and climbed back onto his seat, snapping the reins and sending the horses into motion. The stagecoach rolled away down the street, leaving Sarah standing in the dust with all her belongings at her feet and a near stranger who had just offered her a life she had not imagined was possible. "Thank you," Lucas said simply. "I know this is a big leap of faith. I promise I will not make you regret it." Sarah found herself smiling, really smiling for the first time in months. "I suppose we will find out, but I need to understand exactly what you are proposing, Mr. Xavier. Are you offering me employment or something else entirely?" He met her eyes directly. "I am offering you partnership, equal stake in the ranch, equal say in decisions. Legally, I would want to draw up papers making that clear. You would own half of everything. As for the personal side of things, I think we should take our time and get to know each other properly. I would be lying if I said I had not noticed you before, that I had not thought about what it might be like to court you properly once your mourning period was over. But I also understand you might never see me that way, and I am prepared to accept that. The offer of partnership stands either way." His honesty was disarming. Sarah had grown so accustomed to men who spoke in implications and innuendos, who saw her as either a saint to be pitied or a target to be pursued now, that she was without a husband's protection. Lucas was being straightforward in a way that felt like a gift. "I appreciate your directness," she said. "I will be honest in return. I cared for Thomas deeply and I mourned him truly, but ours was a practical marriage more than a passionate one. We were fond of each other, but we married because it made sense, because he needed a wife and I needed security. I do not want that kind of marriage again. If I ever marry again, I want it to be for love, real love, or not at all. Can you accept that?" "I can," Lucas said without hesitation. "In fact, I want the same thing. So let us start as partners and friends and see where the road takes us." He offered his hand and Sarah shook it. His grip was firm and warm, calloused from years of ranch work. For the first time since Thomas died, she felt something other than grief and exhaustion. She felt possibility. Lucas loaded her trunks into his wagon, which was parked near the livery stable. His chestnut mare was tied to the back, and he helped Sarah up onto the bench seat before climbing up beside her. The wagon creaked as he released the brake and clicked his tongue at the two sturdy draft horses hitched to it. As they rolled out of Mineral Point, heading west toward the open countryside, Sarah took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. The leaves were turning gold and crimson on the scattered oak trees, and the sky was that particular shade of blue that only seemed to exist on perfect fall days. She had been so focused on leaving, on escaping, that she had not allowed herself to notice the beauty of this place. Now, with Lucas sitting beside her and the possibility of a new life ahead, she saw it with fresh eyes. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic clop of hooves and the creak of wagon wheels. Finally, Lucas spoke. "Tell me about yourself, Sarah. If we are going to be partners, I should know more than just your name and that you worked at the mercantile." Sarah appreciated the use of her first name, the assumption of familiarity that came with their new partnership. "There is not much to tell. I grew up in Ohio on a small farm. My parents died of fever when I was 16, and I went to live with my older sister Margaret in St. Louis. That is where I met Thomas. He was passing through on his way here, full of dreams about making his fortune in the lead mines. He needed a wife, I needed security. We married quickly and traveled here together. That was nearly 3 years ago. Did you love him? The question was gentle but probing. Sarah considered how to answer honestly. I cared for him. He was a good man, kind to me, never cruel. But love, I think we might have grown into it given more time. We were still getting to know each other when he got sick. The mine dust destroyed his lungs so quickly. One day he was healthy, the next he could barely breathe. He suffered for 6 months before he died. I am sorry. That must have been terrible to watch. It was the helplessness that was worst, knowing nothing I did would change the outcome. The doctor bills mounted. The mining company refused to take any responsibility, and I watched everything we had worked for disappear into medicine and care that did not even help. By the end, I was so tired I could barely think straight. Lucas nodded, his eyes on the road ahead. That is why you were planning to leave. Fresh start. Yes, I thought getting away from all the memories, all the reminders, would make it easier to move forward. And now, Sarah looked at the landscape rolling past. Now I am not sure. You have disrupted all my plans, Mr. Xavier. Lucas, he corrected with a slight smile. If we are going to be partners, you should call me Lucas. Lucas, she repeated, testing the name. It felt strange but not wrong, and you must call me Sarah. Sarah. He said it softly, like he was tasting the sound of it. It suits you. They crested a low hill, and suddenly the ranch came into view. Sarah's breath caught. It was beautiful in its simplicity. A sturdy wooden house sat in a small valley with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. Split rail fences marked off pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwood trees. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Sarah could see neat rows of a vegetable garden beside the house. "This is yours?" she asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Lucas looked pleased at her reaction. "This is ours now if you decide to stay. I know it is not much compared to some of the big ranches, but I built most of it with my own hands. The house is solid, warm in winter. The barn is new as of last year. The cattle are good stock, and I have been building the herd slowly. There is room to grow." As they drew closer, Sarah could see the care that had gone into everything. The house had glass windows, a real luxury on the frontier. The porch was swept clean, and there were even flower boxes beneath the windows, though the flowers had died back with the approaching winter. The barn was painted a deep red, and the fences were all in good repair. Lucas pulled the wagon up to the house and set the brake. He jumped down and came around to help Sarah down, his hands steady on her waist as he lifted her. For just a moment they were face to face, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes and the small scar on his chin. Then he stepped back, releasing her, and the moment passed. "Let me show you inside," he said, moving to open the front door. The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. The main room was spacious, with the promised stone fireplace taking up most of one wall. A fire burned low in the grate, giving the room a warm glow. The furniture was simple but well made. A wooden table with 6 chairs, a comfortable-looking sofa covered in dark leather, shelves filled with books. The floor was real wood planking, not dirt, and everything was clean and organized. "The kitchen is through here," Lucas said, leading her through a doorway. The kitchen had a modern cast iron stove, a deep sink with a pump for water, and plenty of counter space. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams, and the pantry shelves were well stocked with supplies. "You did all this yourself?" Sarah asked, running her hand over the smooth counter. I had help with some of it. The fireplace, I hired a stonemason. But most of the rest, yes. I have been working on this place for 5 years since I saved enough to buy the land. It has been my dream, building something that is truly mine. He showed her the rest of the house. There were 3 bedrooms, just as he had said. The largest had clearly been his, with a big bed and a wardrobe. The other 2 were smaller but comfortable, each with a bed, a dresser, and a window. One room was set up as an office of sorts with a desk and more books. The other was mostly empty. "You can have your choice of rooms," Lucas said. "Or if you want, we can move my things to one of the smaller rooms and you can have the large one, whatever makes you most comfortable." Sarah looked around the empty room, imagining her things in it, her clothes in the dresser, her books on a shelf. It was strange how quickly the idea of staying here was becoming real in her mind. "This room is perfect," she said. "I do not need the larger one. This has everything I need." Lucas smiled, and Sarah realized it was the first time she had seen him really smile. It transformed his face, made him look younger and more open. "Good. Let me bring your trunks in and you can get settled. I need to check on the cattle and do the evening chores, but I will be back in a few hours to make dinner." "You cook?" Sarah was surprised again. "I have been living alone for 5 years. It was either learn to cook or starve. I am not fancy, but I can make a decent stew and biscuits that will not break your teeth." "Let me help with the chores," Sarah offered. "If I am going to be a partner here, I should start learning what needs to be done." Lucas looked pleased. "I would appreciate that. Change into something more practical than that dress, and meet me at the barn." Sarah changed quickly, grateful to get out of the heavy morning dress and into one of her simpler calico work dresses. She found Lucas in the barn, forking hay down from the loft for the horses. He had taken off his hat, and his dark hair fell across his forehead as he worked. She watched him for a moment, appreciating the efficient way he moved, no wasted motion. He looked up and saw her. "Can you handle feeding the chickens? The grain is in that barrel and they need fresh water too. The coop is just behind the barn." Sarah found the chicken coop and was charmed by the 24 hens scratching in the dirt. They clucked and fussed around her feet as she scattered grain, and she laughed when one particularly bold hen tried to get into the grain bucket. She freshened their water and collected the eggs, finding 8 in the nesting boxes. It was simple work but satisfying in a way her job at the mercantile had never been. She brought the eggs back to the house and returned to find Lucas. He was checking on the cattle now, walking among them with an easy confidence. The cattle were calm around him, not skittish. When he saw Sarah approaching, he waved her over. "They look healthy," she observed, though she knew little about cattle. "They are. This is good land for grazing. Plenty of water from the creek, good grass. I will need to take them to market in about a month, sell off some of the steers. Then I will use that money to buy more breeding stock in the spring. The plan is to double the herd size every 2 years. That is ambitious, maybe. But I think we can do it, especially with 2 of us working together." The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lucas finished his inspection of the cattle and they walked back to the house together. Sarah was acutely aware of him beside her, the quiet confidence he radiated, the way he seemed completely at home in this landscape. She realized she was starting to see him not just as a stranger who had made a wild offer, but as a person, someone with dreams and plans and a whole life she knew nothing about yet. Inside, Lucas proved he had not been exaggerating about his cooking skills. He made a simple but hearty stew with beef, potatoes, and carrots, and his biscuits were fluffy and golden. They ate at the wooden table, and Sarah was surprised by how comfortable it felt, sharing a meal with him in this quiet house. "Tell me about you," Sarah said as they ate. "It is only fair, since you asked about me. Lucas took a sip of water, considering. I grew up in Texas on a ranch much bigger than this one. My father was a ranch hand, my mother was the cook. I learned to ride before I could walk properly, or so my mother used to say. I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister. When I was 20, I decided I wanted my own place, something I built myself rather than working for someone else's dream. So I came north, worked as a cowboy for various ranches, saved every penny I could. It took 8 years, but I finally had enough to buy this land and start building. You miss your family, sometimes, but we were never that close. My brothers thought I was crazy for leaving Texas. They are still working on the same ranch where we grew up, content with their lot. My sister married young, has 3 children now. My parents are getting old. I try to write when I can, let them know I am doing well. It sounds lonely, Sarah said softly. Lucas met her eyes. It has been. I will not lie about that. There have been many nights when I sat by that fire wondering if I had made a mistake, giving up family and familiarity for this dream. But I never could bring myself to give up and go back. This place, this life, it means something to me in a way I cannot fully explain. Sarah understood that feeling, the need to build something of your own, even if it meant being alone. I think you made the right choice. What you have built here is impressive, Lucas. You should be proud. He smiled at that, a warm, genuine smile that made her heart skip unexpectedly. Thank you. That means more than you know. After dinner, Sarah insisted on washing the dishes while Lucas brought in more firewood. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side in the kitchen. Sarah found herself studying him when he was not looking, noticing things she had not before. The way his hands were careful with the dishes despite their size. The small smile that played at his lips when he caught her looking. The gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her. As the evening wore on, they sat by the fire and talked. Lucas asked about her childhood in Ohio, and she found herself telling him stories she had not thought about in years. Her father teaching her to fish in the creek near their farm. Her mother's flower garden that she tended with such care. The way her sister used to braid her hair every morning before school. In turn, Lucas told her about learning to break horses as a boy, the time he got thrown and broke his arm and his father made him get right back on as soon as it healed. The summer storms in Texas that could appear out of nowhere and turn the world into a wall of rain. The first time he slept under the stars while driving cattle and felt truly free. Sarah realized with surprise that it was late, past 10 o'clock, and she was not tired at all. She was energized by their conversation, by the easy way they seemed to understand each other. It felt like she had known Lucas for far longer than just a few hours. I should let you get some rest, Lucas said finally, standing and stretching. Tomorrow I can show you the rest of the ranch, teach you more about the routine here. If you still want to stay, that is. Sarah stood too, suddenly nervous. I do want to stay, at least for a while, to see if this can work. Is that all right? More than all right. Lucas's expression was warm. I am glad you are here, Sarah. I think this could be really good for both of us. He bid her good night and headed to his room. Sarah went to hers, closing the door and leaning against it. Her heart was racing. What had she done? She had given up her plans, her escape to St. Louis, her carefully mapped-out future, all on the basis of a conversation with a man she barely knew. It was impulsive and reckless and completely unlike her usual careful nature. But as she changed into her nightgown and climbed into the comfortable bed, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. Maybe this was where she was meant to be. Maybe Lucas's offer had been more than just chance. Maybe this was her second chance at building a life. And this time she could do it right, on her own terms, with someone who saw her as an equal partner rather than just a wife to manage a household. She fell asleep thinking about amber-colored eyes and gentle hands, and a future that was wide open with possibility. The next morning, Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly and found Lucas in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Morning. I hope I did not wake you. I am used to getting up early." "I am an early riser too," Sarah assured him. "What can I do to help?" They made breakfast together, and Sarah was struck again by how comfortable it felt, how natural. They ate scrambled eggs and bacon with fresh biscuits, and Lucas told her the plan for the day. "I thought I would show you the boundaries of the property, introduce you to the cattle properly, teach you about the daily chores. Then this afternoon, if you are willing, we can ride into town and visit the lawyer. I want to get the partnership papers drawn up properly." "You are serious about that," Sarah said. It was not quite a question. "Completely serious. I do not want you to feel trapped or dependent. If you are going to stay, I want you to know you have real stake in this place, that you are not just a hired hand or a charity case. We are partners, equal in all ways." His earnestness touched her. "Then yes, let us go see the lawyer. I want that security too, the knowledge that I am building something of my own." They spent the morning exploring the ranch. Lucas showed her where the property lines were, marked by distinctive rocks and trees. He introduced her to the cattle, pointing out which ones were the best breeding stock, which calves would be sold at market. He taught her how to spot signs of illness or injury in the animals, how to check the fences for damage, how to read the weather in the clouds and the wind. Sarah absorbed it all eagerly. She had grown up on a farm, so much of it was familiar, but ranching cattle was different than farming crops. Lucas was a patient teacher, never condescending, always willing to explain when she asked questions. She could see why the ranch was thriving under his care. He paid attention to details, planned ahead, worked hard but also worked smart. By midday, they rode back to the house, and Lucas hitched up the wagon for the trip to town. Sarah changed back into a respectable dress, aware that her appearance in town would cause gossip. She had left that morning intending to take the stage to St. Louis, and now she was returning as Lucas Xavier's business partner. People would talk, perhaps unkindly. Lucas seemed to sense her hesitation. "People will gossip no matter what we do," he said gently. "But we know the truth of our arrangement. That is what matters." "You are right," Sarah said, lifting her chin. "I am tired of living my life worried about what people think." The lawyer in Mineral Point was a middle-aged man named Mr. Patterson who had a small office above the bank. He listened carefully as Lucas explained what they wanted, and if he had any personal opinions about the arrangement, he kept them to himself. "I can draw up a partnership agreement," Mr. Patterson said. "You will each own 50% of all property, livestock, and assets. In the event of dissolution of the partnership, all assets will be divided equally." "Is that correct?" "Yes," Lucas said. "And what about in the event of marriage?" Mr. Patterson asked delicately. "If one or both of you should marry, how should that affect the partnership?" Lucas looked at Sarah. They had not discussed this. "What do you think?" he asked her. Sarah thought carefully. "I think the partnership should remain separate from any marriage. If Lucas marries, his wife does not automatically gain share in the ranch unless we all agree to renegotiate the partnership terms. The same for me if I marry." "And if you two should marry each other?" Mr. Patterson asked. There was a long pause. Sarah felt her cheeks heat. The question hung in the air between them. Lucas finally spoke. "Then the partnership would transform into a full marital partnership, but the protections remain. If something happens to one of us, the other inherits everything. No outside family members can make claims." "That seems fair," Sarah agreed. Mr. Patterson nodded and made notes. I will have the papers drawn up by tomorrow. You can come back to sign them then." As they left the office, Sarah felt lighter. It was really happening. She was not leaving Mineral Point. She was staying, building a new life with a partner who respected her enough to make sure she had legal protections and rights. It felt revolutionary in a way she had not expected. They stopped at the Mercantile, so Sarah could apologize in person to Mrs. Henderson for leaving so abruptly. The older woman took one look at Lucas standing supportively beside Sarah and smiled knowingly. "Well, I cannot say I am surprised," Mrs. Henderson said. "Lucas Xavier is a good man, Sarah. You could do much worse. And frankly, that ranch needs a woman's touch. He has been living like a hermit out there." "We are business partners," Sarah said firmly. "Nothing more." "Yet," Mrs. Henderson said with a wink, "but I was young once too. I know how these things develop. Just promise me you will invite me to the wedding when the time comes." Sarah wanted to protest, but Lucas just laughed good-naturedly. "If there is ever a wedding, Mrs. Henderson, you will be the first to know." As they drove back to the ranch, Sarah found herself thinking about marriage. Not the practical, loveless arrangement she had had with Thomas, but something different, something passionate and equal and built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Could she have that with Lucas? It was far too early to know, but she could not deny the spark of attraction she felt when he was near, the way her heart sped up when he smiled at her. Over the next several weeks, they fell into a comfortable routine. Sarah took over the household tasks, cooking and cleaning and managing the vegetable garden. But she also worked outside, helping Lucas with the cattle, mending fences, and learning everything she could about ranching. Her hands grew calloused and her muscles ached, but she felt stronger than she had in months, both physically and emotionally. Lucas was a considerate partner and an even better friend. He consulted her on all decisions, valued her opinions, and praised her when she mastered a new skill. He made her laugh with stories about his misadventures as a young cowboy, and he listened intently when she talked about her dreams and fears. Slowly, carefully, they were building not just a business partnership but a real friendship. The attraction Sarah felt grew stronger with each passing day. She found herself watching Lucas when he worked, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the competence in his hands. She noticed the way his hair curled slightly at his neck when it got too long, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. At night, lying in her bed, she imagined what it would be like to be held by him, to be kissed by him, to share more than just meals and conversation. But she said nothing. The partnership was still new, and she was afraid of disrupting the delicate balance they had found. Besides, she was not even sure he felt the same way. He was always respectful, never crossing any boundaries, treating her like a valued partner but nothing more. What Sarah did not know was that Lucas was struggling with the exact same feelings. He found himself making excuses to be near her, teaching her tasks she probably already knew just so he could stand close and breathe in the scent of her hair. At night, he lay awake thinking about the sound of her laugh, the intelligence in her eyes, the gentle way she handled the animals. He wanted to court her properly, to tell her how he was feeling, but he was terrified of scaring her away or ruining the partnership they had built. November arrived, bringing the first real cold weather. Lucas prepared for the cattle drive to market, and Sarah insisted on going with him. It would be a 3-day trip to the stockyards in Dodgeville, staying overnight at camps along the way. Lucas was hesitant, worried about the propriety of it, but Sarah was adamant. "We are partners," she reminded him. "That means I should be involved in all aspects of the business, including selling the cattle. Besides, I want to see how it is done." He could not argue with that logic. They set out early one morning with 20 head of cattle, driving them slowly along the road. Sarah rode her own horse now, a gentle mare named Daisy that Lucas had helped her choose from a farm near town. She had not ridden much before coming to the ranch, but Lucas had taught her, and she had taken to it naturally. The first day of the drive was long but not difficult. The cattle were cooperative, and the weather held clear and cold. They stopped for lunch beside a stream, and Sarah made sandwiches from the supplies they had packed. As they ate, sitting on a fallen log, their shoulders almost touching, Sarah felt a contentment she had not known was possible. "This is good," she said softly. "All of this. The ranch, the partnership, the work. I am happy, Lucas. Truly happy for the first time in longer than I can remember." Lucas turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I am happy too, Sarah, happier than I have ever been, if I am honest. And it is because of you." Their eyes met and held. Sarah felt her breath catch. There was something in his gaze, something warm and intense that made her heart race. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and she realized she wanted him to, wanted it desperately. But then one of the steers lowed loudly, breaking the moment. Lucas stood quickly, checking on the cattle, and the opportunity passed. Sarah told herself it was for the best. They still had work to do, cattle to deliver. There would be time later for other things. That night, they made camp in a sheltered spot off the road. Lucas built a fire while Sarah prepared a simple dinner of beans and bacon. They ate under a sky full of stars, and Lucas pointed out constellations, telling her the stories behind them that his mother had taught him as a child. When it was time to sleep, Lucas laid out 2 bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. Sarah wrapped herself in her blankets and tried to get comfortable on the hard ground. She heard Lucas moving on the other side of the fire, settling in for the night. "Lucas," she called softly into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for everything, for giving me a reason to stay." There was a long pause, and then his voice came back, warm and deep. "Thank you for taking the chance, for trusting me. You have changed my life, Sarah, made it so much better than it was before." Sarah closed her eyes, smiling in the darkness. She fell asleep listening to the crackle of the fire and the sound of Lucas breathing on the other side of the flames. The next day, they reached the stockyards in Dodgeville by late afternoon. The place was busy with cowboys and ranchers, all bringing their cattle to market. Lucas negotiated confidently with the buyers, and Sarah watched and learned. He got a good price for their steers, better than he had expected, and he made a point of telling the buyers that Sarah was his partner, that she had equal say in all transactions. With the cattle sold and money in hand, they found a respectable boarding house where they could spend the night before heading home. The proprietor, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Fitzgerald, gave them a disapproving look when Lucas asked for 2 separate rooms. "We are business partners," Sarah explained quickly. "Nothing improper." Mrs. Fitzgerald sniffed but gave them keys to 2 rooms on the second floor. After stabling the horses, they met for dinner in the boarding house dining room. It was the first real meal they had eaten at a table in days, and Sarah savored the roasted chicken and fresh bread. After dinner, Lucas suggested a walk. The evening was cold but clear, and the small town was decorated with early Christmas decorations even though it was only mid-November. They walked down the main street, looking in shop windows, talking about what supplies they needed to buy before heading back to the ranch. Lucas stopped in front of a small jewelry shop. In the window, a delicate silver locket caught the lamplight. "That is pretty," he said. "Do you like it?" Sarah looked at the locket. It was beautiful, simple, but elegant. "It is lovely." Before she could say anything else, Lucas had gone into the shop. She followed, protesting. "Lucas, you do not need to buy me anything." "I want to," he said simply. "You have worked so hard these past weeks," Learned so much. Let me do this." The shopkeeper brought out the locket and Sarah held it carefully. It was even prettier up close with delicate engraving on the silver. Lucas bought it without hesitation and asked the shopkeeper to put it in a small box. Outside, he handed her the box. "Open it later," he said, "when you are alone." Sarah clutched the box, touched beyond words. It was the first gift anyone had given her in years, and it meant everything that Lucas had thought to do it. They walked back to the boarding house slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. At the bottom of the stairs leading to their rooms, they paused. Sarah knew she should go up, should say good night and retreat to her room. But she did not want to. She wanted to stay here with Lucas in this moment where anything seemed possible. "Sarah," Lucas said softly. He reached out and gently took her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, a feather-light touch that sent shivers through her. "I need to tell you something. I cannot keep it inside anymore." Her heart pounded. "What is it?" "I know we agreed to be partners, to take things slowly, and I meant that. I still mean it. But I also need you to know that I have feelings for you, deep feelings. I think about you constantly. You are the first thing on my mind when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. Working with you, living near you, sharing meals and conversation, it has all made me fall for you in a way I never expected." Sarah could hardly breathe. "Lucas, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted. "I am not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. If you only ever want to be partners and friends, I can accept that. But I would regret it forever if I did not at least tell you how I feel." Sarah looked up at him, at this good man who had given her so much, who had believed in her when she had not believed in herself. All the walls she had built around her heart, all the fear and caution, suddenly seemed pointless. Life was too short and too uncertain to hold back when something real was standing right in front of her. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to keep things professional and distant, but I cannot. I think I started falling for you that first day when you offered me a partnership. You saw me as an equal, as someone worth investing in. No one had ever done that before." Lucas's face lit up with joy. He cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," she breathed. He kissed her softly, tenderly, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. Sarah melted into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart racing under her palms, matching the frantic beat of her own. The kiss deepened, and Sarah felt like she was coming alive after years of being numb. This was what she had been missing, what she had not even known she was looking for. This connection, this passion, this sense of rightness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, take you on dates, bring you flowers, all the things you deserve." Sarah laughed softly. "We live and work together. I think we are a bit past traditional courting. Maybe, but I still want to do it. I want you to know how much you mean to me, how serious I am about this." "I know," Sarah said, reaching up to touch his face. "I know, and I want that too. Let us court each other, even if it is unconventional. Let us build something real and lasting." Lucas kissed her again, and Sarah thought her heart might burst from happiness. When they finally went upstairs to their separate rooms, she was floating. In her room, she opened the box containing the locket. Inside was a tiny piece of paper with Lucas's handwriting. It said simply, "For Sarah, who gave me a reason to dream again." She put the locket on immediately, holding it close to her heart as she got ready for bed. That night, she slept better than she had in months, her dreams full of amber eyes and gentle touches and a future that shone bright with promise. The journey back to the ranch was entirely different from the drive to Dodgeville. Now, Sarah and Lucas rode side by side, talking and laughing, no longer constrained by the uncertainty of what lay between them. They held hands across their saddles, stopped to steal kisses under the wide prairie sky, and made plans for the future. "I want to expand the herd significantly," Lucas said as they rode. "With two of us working together, we can handle more cattle. In a few years, this could be one of the best ranches in the territory." "I want to plant a bigger garden in the spring," Sarah added, "and maybe get some pigs. We could sell eggs and vegetables in town as well, diversify our income." "You are thinking like a true rancher," Lucas said approvingly. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the house and barn in golden light. As Lucas helped Sarah down from her horse, he pulled her close for a long kiss. "Welcome home," he whispered against her lips. "Home," Sarah repeated, savoring the word. It felt true in a way it never had before. This was home, this place, this man, this life they were building together. Over the next month, they settled into a new rhythm. They were still partners in the ranch, still equal in all business decisions. But now there was also romance woven through their days. Lucas brought her wildflowers he found on his rides, even though it was late in the season and pickings were slim. Sarah baked his favorite desserts and mended his clothes with care. They sat close on the sofa in the evenings, reading aloud to each other from the books on Lucas's shelves. They stole kisses in the barn, held hands across the dinner table, and fell more deeply in love with each passing day. As December arrived, Lucas began to plan. He wanted to ask Sarah to marry him, but he wanted to do it right. He rode into Mineral Point and spoke to Mr. Patterson about updating their partnership agreement to reflect a marriage. He visited the jeweler and ordered a ring, using part of the profit from the cattle sale. He talked to the pastor at the small church about arranging a wedding ceremony. Sarah, for her part, was blissfully unaware of Lucas's planning. She was too busy preparing for winter, making sure they had enough supplies laid in, preserving the last of the garden vegetables, helping Lucas reinforce the barn against the cold winds that would soon blow down from the north. One evening in mid-December, after the first real snowfall of the season had blanketed the ranch in white, Lucas asked Sarah to bundle up and come outside with him. She was puzzled but complied, wrapping herself in her warmest cloak and following him out into the winter night. He had built a small fire in a sheltered spot behind the house, near the creek. The snow glowed in the firelight, and the stars above were brilliant in the cold, clear air. Lucas had laid out blankets near the fire and brought hot cider in a jug. "What is all this?" Sarah asked, charmed by the romantic gesture. "I wanted to talk to you somewhere special," Lucas said. He took her hands in his and she noticed they were trembling slightly. Was he nervous? "Lucas, what is going on?" He took a deep breath. "Sarah, these past 3 months have been the best of my life. You have transformed everything. This ranch, my daily existence, my future, it is all brighter and better because you are in it. I was existing before you came, just going through the motions. But now I am truly living." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Lucas, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we started this as a business arrangement. I offered you partnership because I thought it was the right thing to do and because I admired you and wanted to help. But it became so much more than that, so quickly. You are my partner, yes, but you are also my best friend, my confidante, the person I trust most in the world. And somewhere along the way, you became the love of my life." He released one of her hands and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. Sarah's breath caught as he dropped to one knee in the snow. "Sarah Dalton, will you marry me? Will you be my wife as well as my partner? Will you build this life with me, not just as equal stakeholders in a ranch, but as husband and wife who love each other completely?" Sarah was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, of course, yes." Lucas stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. When they pulled apart, he opened the box to reveal a beautiful gold ring with a small diamond. It was simple but perfect, much like everything about their relationship. He slid it onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They sat by the fire for hours, wrapped in blankets, talking about their wedding, their future, their dreams. They decided to marry in the spring, after the worst of the winter had passed. They would have a simple ceremony at the church in town, invite their few close friends, and then come home to start their life together as husband and wife. That night, when they finally went back inside, Lucas walked Sarah to her bedroom door as he had done every night. But this time, when he kissed her goodnight, it was with the knowledge that this separation was temporary. Soon, they would share a room, a bed, a life completely joined. Winter settled over the ranch in earnest, but inside the house, Sarah and Lucas were warm and content. They spent the long, dark evenings planning their wedding and their future. They talked about children, agreeing they wanted a large family if they were blessed with one. They discussed expanding the ranch, maybe hiring a hand or two to help with the work so they would have more time together. They dreamed about growing old side by side, watching their grandchildren play in the yard of this house they both loved. On Christmas morning, they exchanged small gifts. Sarah gave Lucas a new leather belt she had commissioned from the cobbler in town, with his initials tooled into the leather. Lucas gave Sarah a beautiful shawl woven in soft blues and greens. They cooked a special meal together, roasting a goose and making all the trimmings. As they sat by the fire that evening, full and happy, Sarah thought about how different this Christmas was from the last one, when Thomas was dying and she was drowning in grief and fear. This year, she had hope and love and a future that stretched out bright before her. The weeks passed in a blur of contentment. Winter on the ranch was hard work, but also oddly peaceful. The cattle needed less attention than in the warmer months, and there were no crops to tend. Sarah and Lucas spent their time maintaining the buildings, planning for spring, and simply enjoying being together. January arrived, then February. As the days slowly grew longer and the first hints of spring appeared, they began preparing for the wedding in earnest. Sarah worked with Mrs. Henderson to make a simple but beautiful wedding dress in cream-colored silk. Lucas ordered a new suit from the tailor. They sent a letter to Sarah's sister in St. Louis, inviting her to the wedding, though they were not sure if she would be able to make the long journey. March brought the first real warmth, and with it, preparations for the wedding intensified. They had decided to marry on the first day of April, a new month for a new beginning. The church was booked, the pastor prepared, and invitations sent to their small circle of friends in Mineral Point. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sarah received a letter that made her cry with joy. Her sister Margaret was coming, and she was bringing her husband and 2 children. They would arrive a few days before the wedding and stay for a week. Sarah had not seen her family in over 3 years, and the thought of having them present for her wedding meant everything. The night before Margaret was due to arrive, Sarah confessed to Lucas that she was nervous. "What if she does not approve of you? What if she thinks we move too fast, that we do not really know each other?" Lucas pulled her close, stroking her hair soothingly. "Then we will prove her wrong. We will show her how good we are together, how much we love each other. And if she still does not approve, well, we are both adults making our own choices. But I have a feeling she will see what I see, what everyone who knows us sees. We are meant to be together." Margaret arrived the next day with her family, and Sarah's fears proved groundless. Her older sister took one look at Lucas and Sarah together and smiled knowingly. "I can see it in your eyes, both of you. You are in love, Real, deep love. I am so happy for you, Sarah. After everything you went through with Thomas, you deserve this happiness." The two sisters stayed up late that night, talking and catching up. Sarah told Margaret everything about how she and Lucas had met, the partnership arrangement, the slow development of their relationship. Margaret listened, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just smiling. "He is a good man," Margaret finally said. "I can see that. The way he looks at you, the way he talks about you, it is clear you are everything to him. Hold on to that, Sarah. Real love like that is rare." The week before the wedding flew by in a whirl of activity. The whole community seemed caught up in the excitement. Mrs. Henderson organized a group of women to help prepare the church. Several ranchers offered to bring food for the reception. Even the stern Mrs. Fitzgerald from Dodgeville sent a gift, a beautiful quilt she had sewn herself. The night before the wedding, Lucas and Sarah stood on the porch of their house, looking out at the land they had worked together to build into something special. The moon was full, bathing everything in silver light. "This time tomorrow you will be my wife," Lucas said wonderingly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that you chose me." Sarah turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "I chose you because you chose me first, because you saw me not as a widow to be pitied or a woman to be controlled, but as a person with value and skills and dreams. You gave me a partnership when I expected nothing. You gave me friendship when I was lonely. And you gave me love when I thought I would never find it. How could I choose anyone else?" He kissed her then, long and deep and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I should go," Sarah said reluctantly. "It is bad luck for the groom to see the bride on the wedding day before the ceremony." "That is superstitious nonsense," Lucas protested, but he was smiling. "Maybe, but let us not take chances. I will see you at the church tomorrow." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, a perfect April morning. Sarah woke in her room for the last time as a single woman. Margaret helped her dress in the cream silk gown, pinned up her hair with small white flowers Lucas had somehow found despite the early season, and fastened the silver locket around her neck. "You look beautiful," Margaret said with tears in her eyes. "Mama would be so proud of you." At the church, the small building was packed with well-wishers. Sarah was surprised and touched to see how many people had come. Her friends from town, ranchers Lucas worked with, even some of the miners from the lead mines. It seemed everyone wanted to celebrate with them. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Sarah walked down the aisle on her brother-in-law's arm, and her eyes locked with Lucas's as soon as she entered the church. He stood at the front in his new suit, looking handsome and nervous and completely devoted. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." The pastor spoke about love and partnership, about the covenant of marriage being both a spiritual bond and a practical union. He spoke about how Sarah and Lucas had already proven their commitment to each other through their business partnership, and how that solid foundation would serve them well in their marriage. When it came time for the vows, Lucas spoke as clearly and firmly, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "I, Lucas Xavier, take you, Sarah Dalton, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things, to respect your opinions and value your contributions. I promise to support your dreams and comfort your sorrows. From this day forward, you are my family, my home, my heart." Sarah's voice was thick with emotion as she spoke her own vows. "I, Sarah Dalton, take you, Lucas Xavier, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things, to stand beside you in good times and bad. I promise to build a life with you that is full of love, laughter, and mutual respect. From this day forward, you are my family, my home, my heart." Lucas slid a simple gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring. Sarah placed a matching band on his finger. And when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife and told Lucas he could kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was full of joy and promise and deep, abiding love. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside in the spring sunshine. There was music and dancing and more food than they could possibly eat. Sarah danced with Lucas, with her brother-in-law, with some of the ranchers who had become friends. Lucas danced with Margaret, with Mrs. Henderson, and with several of the women from town who wanted to congratulate him on his marriage. As the sun began to set and the guests started to leave, Sarah and Lucas stood together, waving goodbye. Margaret was the last to go, pulling Sarah into a tight hug. "Be happy," she whispered. "You deserve all the happiness in the world." "I will," Sarah promised. "I already am." Finally, they were alone. Lucas swept Sarah up into his arms and carried her over the threshold of their home. She laughed, clinging to his neck. He carried her not to the bedroom but to the living room, setting her down gently on the sofa in front of the fire he had built earlier. "I want to savor this moment," he said, sitting beside her and pulling her close. "Our first evening as husband and wife." They sat together, watching the fire, talking softly about the day, about how perfect everything had been. Eventually, Lucas stood and offered Sarah his hand. "Come to bed with me," he said simply. "My wife." Sarah took his hand, her heart full to bursting. They went to the large bedroom together, the one that had been Lucas's but was now theirs. And as Lucas undressed her slowly, reverently, as he kissed every inch of her skin and whispered how much he loved her, Sarah felt like she had finally found where she belonged. In his arms, in this house, in this life they had built together. That night, they made love for the first time, learning each other's bodies with tenderness and passion. It was everything Sarah had hoped it could be, so different from the dutiful, mechanical encounters she had experienced in her first marriage. With Lucas, it was connection and intimacy and pleasure all woven together. They loved each other late into the night, and when they finally fell asleep, tangled together beneath the quilts, both wore smiles of deep contentment. The months that followed were full of hard work and simple joys. Spring turned into summer, and they worked side by side to build their ranch and their life. They bought more cattle with the money saved from the previous year. They planted a large garden and added chickens and a few pigs to their farm. They hired a young man from town named Peter to help with some of the heavier work, giving them more time to focus on planning and management. Sarah flourished in her role as Lucas's wife and partner. She proved to have a good head for the business side of ranching, keeping meticulous records of expenses and income, negotiating good deals with suppliers in town. Lucas deferred to her judgment on financial matters and praised her skills openly, much to the surprise of some of the more traditional ranchers in the area who could not fathom a woman being involved in business decisions. Their love continued to deepen. They made time for romance even amid the busy work of the ranch. Lucas would sometimes surprise Sarah with picnics by the creek. Sarah would pack special treats in Lucas's saddlebags when he had to ride out to check on distant parts of their property. At night, they would fall into bed exhausted but always take time to hold each other, to talk about their day, to make love with the passion that never seemed to diminish. In late summer, Sarah began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited until she was sure before telling Lucas, wanting to surprise him with the news at the perfect moment. One evening in early September, After a particularly successful day that saw them negotiating a deal for a prize bull that would improve their herd, Sarah decided it was time. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Sarah took Lucas's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said softly. "You are going to be a father, Lucas." For a moment, Lucas just stared at her, not comprehending. Then understanding dawned on his face, and it transformed into the biggest smile Sarah had ever seen. He whooped with joy, jumping up and spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are having a baby. Sarah, this is the best news, the very best news." He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her stomach as if he might hear something. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your papa. I am so excited to meet you. Your mama and we are going to love you so much. More than you can possibly imagine." Sarah ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. She had never been this happy, never imagined she could be. Less than a year ago, she had been preparing to leave this place forever, convinced her life held nothing but loneliness and struggle. Now she had a husband she adored, a home she loved, a business she was proud of, and a baby on the way. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. Lucas stood and pulled her into a gentle embrace. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for giving me a reason to stay," Sarah replied, echoing her thoughts from that first day. "Thank you for seeing me, for valuing me, for loving me the way I always hoped to be loved." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and winter. Sarah continued to work on the ranch, though Lucas hovered anxiously and tried to get her to rest more than she thought necessary. She felt healthy and strong, and she enjoyed every moment of carrying their child, watching her body change and feeling the baby move inside her. They prepared one of the smaller bedrooms as a nursery, painting it a cheerful yellow and building a cradle that Lucas carved with intricate designs. Sarah sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation. Margaret sent packages from St. Louis with more baby items and long letters full of advice about childbirth and caring for infants. In late March of 1850, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Sarah went into labor. Lucas rode frantically into town to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in Mineral Point. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Lucas stayed by Sarah's side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths and whispering encouragement. Finally, as the sun was setting on their second day of marriage anniversary, their son was born. He came into the world with a loud, healthy cry that made both parents laugh through their tears. Mrs. Chen cleaned him up and placed him in Sarah's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face of her child with wonder. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Lucas knelt beside the bed, his arm around Sarah, both of them staring at their son in awe. "He is perfect," Lucas said, his voice choked with emotion. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Sarah knew immediately. "Thomas," she said, "Thomas Lucas Xavier. For the man who brought me here and the man who gave me a reason to stay." Lucas looked at her in surprise. "Are you sure? I do not want you to be sad every time you say his name." Sarah shook her head. "I will not be sad. Thomas Dalton was a good man who deserved to be remembered, and our Thomas will be his own person, with his own life and his own story. But honoring the past while building the future feels right to me." "Thomas Lucas Xavier," Lucas repeated, testing it out. He stroked his son's tiny hand with one finger. "Welcome to the world, Thomas. You are the luckiest boy alive because you get Sarah Dalton Xavier as your mother." "Sarah Xavier," Sarah corrected with a smile. "I am Sarah Xavier now, and you are right, our son is lucky, but so are we. So very, very lucky." The first year of Thomas's life was exhausting and magical in equal measure. Sarah and Lucas took turns caring for him, learning as they went. Lucas proved to be a devoted father, waking for midnight feedings, singing softly to Thomas when he was fussy, carrying him in a sling while doing chores around the ranch. Sarah marveled at how naturally fatherhood came to him, how gentle and patient he was. The ranch continued to thrive. With Peter's help and Sarah's careful management, they were able to expand even more than they had planned. By the time Thomas celebrated his first birthday, they had tripled their original herd size and were known throughout the territory as one of the most successful ranching operations in the area. But more important than the success of the ranch was the success of their family. Sarah and Lucas grew closer with each passing month, their love deepening as they navigated the challenges and joys of parenthood together. They remained true partners in every sense, making decisions together, supporting each other, and never losing sight of the romance that had brought them together. On their second wedding anniversary, they stood on the porch together, watching Thomas toddle around the yard, chasing chickens and laughing with delight. Sarah leaned against Lucas, his arm around her waist, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. "Do you ever think about that day?" Lucas asked. "The day I stopped you from getting on that stage all the time," Sarah admitted. "I think about how close I came to leaving, to missing all of this. It terrifies me sometimes how easily I could have said no to you, could have gotten on that stage and never looked back. But you did not," Lucas said, turning her to face him. "You stayed. You took a chance on me, on us, and look what we built." Sarah looked around at their beautiful ranch, at their healthy son, at the life they had created together. "I stayed because you gave me a reason to," she said. "You saw me. Really saw me when everyone else just saw a sad widow. You offered me partnership and respect and eventually love." "How could I not stay for that?" Lucas kissed her softly. "I love you, Sarah Xavier, more than I can ever put into words. You are my partner, my best friend, my wife, the mother of my child. You are my everything." "And you are mine," Sarah replied. "My everything and more. Thank you for stopping me that day. Thank you for giving me a reason to stay." 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter they named Margaret Rose, after Sarah's sister and Lucas's mother. Thomas was a devoted big brother from the start, carefully helping his mother care for the baby and showing her all his favorite things around the ranch. 3 years after Margaret came a third child, a boy they named David, with Lucas's amber eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin. The house that had once seemed too big for one lonely cowboy now rang with the sounds of children laughing, playing, and growing. Through it all, Sarah and Lucas remained devoted to each other and to the life they were building. They worked hard, loved deeply, and raised their children with the same values of partnership and respect that had founded their own relationship. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful in Wisconsin territory, and eventually, in the new state of Wisconsin after statehood was granted in 1848. Years passed in a blur of seasons and milestones. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning ranching from his father and business management from his mother. Margaret proved to have a gift with horses, training and breeding them with skill that surprised even experienced horsemen. David developed a love of books and numbers, helping his mother keep the ranch accounts and eventually going to college to study business. Lucas and Sarah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering with time and sun, but their love never diminished. They still held hands while walking around the property. They still stole kisses in the barn. They still talked late into the night about their dreams and fears and hopes. They still faced every challenge as partners, making decisions together, supporting each other through difficulties. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over the territory, now state, to honor the couple who had become legendary for their successful partnership both in business and in marriage. As Sarah looked around at the crowd of people, at her 3 grown children and their families, at the ranch that had grown from Lucas's modest dream into a thriving operation, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Lucas found her standing alone for a moment and pulled her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, knowing her so well after all these years. "I am thinking about that day 25 years ago," Sarah said, "when I was standing in the street in Mineral Point, waiting for a stage that would take me away from here forever. I was so certain that leaving was the only option, the only way forward. And then you rode up on that chestnut mare and offered me something I had not dared to hope for." "A partnership," Lucas said. "A partnership," Sarah agreed, "but it became so much more than that. It became love and family and home. It became everything I never knew I wanted." Lucas kissed her forehead. "You gave me the same things, you know. Before you came, I had the ranch, but it was just work, just a way to pass the time. You made it a home. You made it matter." Their oldest son, Thomas, now 24 and recently married himself, came over to them. "Mama, Papa, everyone wants to hear the story about how you met, how you got together. Will you tell it?" Sarah looked at Lucas and he nodded. They had told the story many times over the years, to their children, to friends, to anyone who asked about their relationship. But it never got old, never lost its power. Standing before the crowd of people they loved, Sarah began the tale. 25 years ago, I was preparing to leave Mineral Point forever," she said. "I had lost my first husband to the mines, sold everything I owned and bought a ticket on the stage to St. Louis. I thought my life here was over, that there was nothing left for me in this place." Lucas picked up the story. "I had heard she was leaving, and I remembered a promise I had made to her dying husband that I would look out for her. But it was more than that. I had watched Sarah from a distance for months, admired her strength and determination. When I heard she was leaving, I knew I had to try to give her a reason to stay. He offered me a partnership," Sarah continued. "Equal ownership of his ranch in exchange for my help running it. No expectations, no strings, just a business proposition. It was the craziest thing I had ever heard, and also the most appealing. Here was someone who saw me as a partner, as an equal, not just as a woman who needed to be taken care of." "I did not expect to fall in love with her," Lucas said, smiling at Sarah. "I thought maybe we would be friends, good business partners. But the more I got to know her, the more I realized she was everything I had been looking for. Smart, capable, kind, beautiful. How could I not fall in love? He courted me with wildflowers and home-cooked meals and respect," Sarah said. "He valued my opinions, listened to my ideas, treated me like an equal in every way. And somewhere along the way I fell in love too. Deeply, completely, forever." Lucas pulled her close. "She gave me a home, a family, a purpose beyond just working and surviving. She made my dreams bigger and better than I ever imagined they could be." Sarah looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "And he gave me a reason to stay. Not just that first day, but every day since. He gives me reasons every morning when I wake up beside him, every evening when we sit on the porch and watch the sunset, every moment in between. He is my reason, now and always." They kissed, and the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Their children hugged them, their grandchildren clung to their legs. and Sarah felt a joy so pure and complete that she thought her heart might burst from it. That night, after all the guests had gone and the children had retired to their own homes, Sarah and Lucas sat on their porch just as they had done thousands of times before. The moon was full, casting silver light over the ranch they had built together. In the distance, they could hear cattle lowing softly and the creek bubbling over rocks. 25 years, Sarah said wonderingly. It feels like yesterday and also like a lifetime ago. I would do it all again in a heartbeat, Lucas said. Every moment, good and bad, easy and hard. All of it brought us here to this moment, and I would not change a thing. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. Neither would I. Well, maybe I would have said yes to your proposal faster, saved us both some anxiety. Lucas laughed. You said yes fast enough. Any faster, and I would have thought you were not taking it seriously. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, two people who had started as near strangers and built a life together that was richer and more fulfilling than either had dreamed possible. The ranch would continue on, passed down to their children and grandchildren. But the real legacy, Sarah thought, was not the land or the cattle or the buildings. It was the love they had created, the partnership they had forged, the family they had raised together. Lucas spoke into the quiet. Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding night, about finally finding where you belonged? I remember, Sarah said softly. I felt the same way. Like I had been wandering my whole life, looking for something without knowing what it was. And then you stayed, and suddenly everything made sense. You were what I had been looking for. Home was not a place, it was you. Sarah turned to kiss him, long and sweet and full of 25 years of love and devotion. When they pulled apart, she said, "Take me to bed, husband. We have an anniversary to celebrate properly." Lucas stood and helped her up, and they walked into the house hand in hand, just as they had done on their wedding night and countless nights since. Behind them, the ranch lay peaceful under the moon, a testament to what two people could build when they chose partnership, respect, and love as their foundation. The years continued to pass in the way years do, bringing changes both expected and surprising. Lucas and Sarah grew into their roles as grandparents with the same devotion they had brought to parenting. They spoiled their grandchildren appropriately, teaching them about ranching and life and the importance of partnership in all relationships. As they entered their 60s, they began to slow down, handing over more of the day-to-day running of the ranch to their son Thomas, who had proven himself more than capable. But they still walked their property every day, still checked on the cattle, still planned and dreamed about the future of the ranch. On their 30th wedding anniversary, as they stood on the same spot where Lucas had proposed all those years ago, he pulled her close and said, "Do you have any regrets, Sarah?" "Anything you wish had been different," Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I regret the years before I met you, the time I wasted in a loveless marriage because I thought practical was more important than passionate. But I cannot truly regret even that, because it brought me here to you, to this life. So no, I have no regrets. Only gratitude for every moment we have had together." "I love you," Lucas said simply. "More at this moment than ever before, if that is possible. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah Xavier, the very best thing." "And you are mine," Sarah replied. "My best thing, my reason for staying, my home." They lived out their years in contentment and peace, surrounded by family, working the land they loved and cherishing each other every single day. When Lucas passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, with Sarah holding his hand and his children and grandchildren surrounding his bed, his last words were, "Thank you for staying. Thank you for giving me the best life a man could hope for." Sarah lived 3 more years without him. staying on the ranch she loved, cared for by her devoted children. She spent her days telling stories to her great-grandchildren about the cowboy who had given her a reason to stay, about the partnership that had become the greatest love of her life, about building something that lasted far beyond their years. When Sarah died at 76, also peacefully in her sleep, she was buried beside Lucas on a hillside overlooking the ranch. Their shared headstone read simply, "Lucas and Sarah Xavier, partners in life, partners in love, partners forever." The ranch they had built continued on, passed down through generations, growing and changing but always remaining a testament to what they had created. Their descendants would tell the story for generations to come, about the widow who almost left forever and the cowboy who gave her a reason to stay, and how that single moment of choice, of courage, of hope, had changed everything and built a legacy of love that would last long after they were gone. And on quiet evenings when the sun set over the ranch, casting golden light over the same hills and valleys that Lucas and Sarah had walked together, those who knew the story would sometimes say they could feel the presence of the two founders, still walking hand in hand, still partners, still deeply and eternally in love with each other, and with the beautiful life they had chosen to build together.